bumpy ride for the government's high-speed rail expansion plan, as residents along the route pledge to fight the scheme every inch of the way. Not even £500 million on tunnelling can win over the sceptics.
£32 billion worth of expenditure at a time of national austerity is a lot of money, and I think we all know it's going to be at least twice that by the time it's actually done.
This is the ITV News at 6:30 with Mary Nightingale and Alistair Stewart.
Business backs the plan to cut journey times between London, Birmingham and ultimately beyond. But even without objections, it won't be built for more than a decade. Also tonight, Syria's Assad sends a defiant message to the Arab League as up to 30 protesters are killed.
Miliband tries to turn things around with a speech on fairness in tough economic times.
And fresh demands to remove suspect breast implants in England as the Welsh Assembly changes its policy.
Good evening. The government's plans for a high-speed rail network finally left the sidings today and ran straight into a row. The first phase of the controversial scheme between London and Birmingham will cut journey times to 45 minutes, but will cost £16 billion.
Of that, £500 million will go on tunnelling to protect parts of the picturesque Chilterns. It was part of a package to buy off opposition, but hasn't worked. The president of the Conservative Association in Amersham, one of the towns along the proposed route, resigned in protest. From there, Paul Davies reports.
It will carve its high-speed route through and in some cases under beauty spots and ancient forest, infuriating many traditional Tory voters in the leafy Chilterns. The government insists the pain will be worth it.
High-speed rail is a direct line to growth. It will also provide the critical capacity that rail passengers will need, not in just the next 5 to 10 years, but in the next 40 to 50 years.
HS2, no thank you!
In the Chiltern town of Amersham, the go-ahead for HS2 was greeted with anger. And not only, they insist, because of the mess it'll cause in their backyard.
The fundamental problem is the business case just doesn't stack up. It's £32+ billion worth of taxpayers' money that's really being poorly spent on this, when we should be investing in jobs and growth and rebuilding our manufacturing industry now.
The journey from London to Birmingham currently takes nearly an hour and a half. The high-speed rail link will reduce that journey to 49 minutes. It should be up and running by 2026. The route will cross an area of natural beauty in the Chilterns, so long tunnels will now be used to reduce noise levels and the impact on people living nearby. Phase 2 will see the route extended to Manchester and Leeds by 2032. The tunnels under the Chiltern countryside, one of which will emerge just over there, are being described by some as a blatant attempt to buy off the revolt of voters and MPs in this Tory heartland. It's certainly an expensive addition to the project. One estimate says a total cost of £500 million works out at £190,000 per yard, £5,500 per inch of tunnelling. The local Tory party president said a tunnel didn't buy his support.
I am resigning from the Conservative Party and anything to do with the Conservative Party as from today.
Worried about the impact of 200-mile-an-hour plus trains on local life, Tony Williams, who's run this hilltop equestrian centre near Amersham for 20 years and has just discovered the new HS2 tunnel will pass under his land.
What's going to happen to the aquifers and the water table and the lake and the rivers around here over this valley? It's nobody seems to really know. They're in uncharted territory up to a certain degree.
Despite such fears, this is how the government sees HS2 working when its first phase is completed in 2026. Opponents say they still have legal challenges to make and haven't given up hope of derailing the scheme. Paul Davies, ITV News, Buckinghamshire.
All right, so let's go to our political correspondent, Lucy Manning. Now, Lucy, this is obviously a very controversial project. Where are the dividing lines politically?
Well, the Transport Secretary says that this is the Victorian rail revolution happening again, but the revolution could be on the Tory benches because the political divisions aren't between the parties. Labour does support HS2. It's between those MPs in the Midlands and the North who support this and those MPs that will see big disruption when the line goes through their constituencies, and that, the problem for the Prime Minister, is those are mainly Tory MPs. Cheryl Gillam, the Welsh Secretary who many had tipped to resign over this, she has been in some ways placated by this extra tunnel that they've found. She welcomed the changes today but said this was at the early stages, and that is the point, that this is going to be nearly 2 years before the legislation comes to Parliament. The routes up to Leeds and Manchester, that isn't going to be in that initial legislation. So I think the Tory MPs will bide their time, but the issues still remain.
Lucy Manning at Westminster.